The galaxy is a cold, silent place, but the neon-drenched corridors of Station Aegis 7 were screaming. Somewhere between the seventh moon of Kaltos and the edge of the void, humanity had carved out a precarious existence. But on this night, the air felt different. It tasted of ozone and ancient secrets. Most humans stayed in the safe sector, but Elias wasn't most humans. He was a freelance pulse tech, the kind of man who fixed the machines that kept the darkness at bay. He was tired. He was lonely. And he was about to make a mistake that would change the course of his life and perhaps the fate of two worlds. He sat at the edge of the Singularity Lounge, a bar where the gravity was optional and the drinks were lethal. The room was a chaotic tapestry of bioluminescent scales, multiple limbs, and languages that sounded like grinding glass. Elias leaned against the counter, his hands stained with the grease of a dozen repaired atmospheric processors. He just wanted a moment of peace. He wanted to disappear into the background noise of 300 alien species. But in a universe this crowded, a human male with a certain look in his eyes is never truly invisible. Especially not to them. They moved through the crowd like twin shadows of elegance and terror. The Xylari. They were tall, their skin a shimmering pearlescent silver that seemed to catch the dim light of the bar and pulse with its own internal rhythm. Their eyes were deep pools of violet, swirling with nebulae. They were royalty in a sector that didn't believe in kings, and they were staring directly at the exhausted human in the corner. Elias felt the temperature in the room drop. Or maybe it was just his heart skipping a beat. He looked up, his glass halfway to his lips, and found himself pinned by 4 violet eyes. He didn't know their names yet. He didn't know they were the daughters of the High Hegemon. He just knew they were the most beautiful and dangerous things he had ever seen. One of them, the one with a jagged sapphire crest along her brow, leaned in. Her voice wasn't a sound. It was a vibration that settled deep in his bones. "A human," she whispered, the translation implant in Elias's ear, struggling to capture the melodic complexity of her tone. "Alone in the den of the Star Eaters. Are you lost, little spark?" Elias felt a surge of that classic human defiance. He smiled, a crooked, weary thing. "Not lost," he replied, his voice raspy from a double shift. "Just resting. It's been a long day of keeping this tin can from imploding." The second twin, her eyes narrowed in a mix of curiosity and something much more predatory, stepped closer. Her scent hit him like sandalwood and a coming thunderstorm. "A worker of wires," she purred. "But where is your tether? Where is the one who claims your light when the suns go down?" Elias should have been careful. He knew the Xylari took social contracts seriously. He knew their culture was built on the sanctity of the bond, but he was exhausted and his filter was gone. He let out a soft laugh, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "My tether? I'm a free agent. I jokingly say I'm single just to keep the paperwork simple, but honestly, I'm as unattached as a rogue comet. Hold on before we get into the real stuff I want to know. What are you doing at this exact moment while hearing my voice? I love seeing your answers down below in the comments." The twins froze. The bioluminescence on their skin flared into a brilliant, blinding gold. The entire bar went silent. Even the multi-armed percussionist stopped his rhythm. Elias realized too late that he hadn't just made a joke. He had made a declaration. The twins looked at each other, a silent communication passing between them that felt like a lightning strike. Then, simultaneously, they reached out. Their hands, cool and firm, clamped onto Elias's shoulders. "Single?" The first one whispered, her grip tightening until it bruised. "In the presence of the twin crowns? You have no idea what just invited, human Elias. You are unattached no longer," the second twin declared, her voice booming through the silent lounge. "By the laws of the Xylari Hegemony, the unclaimed are a gift from the stars. And we are very, very fond of gifts." Elias tried to stand, to laugh it off, to explain it was just a figure of speech. But the twins didn't move. They loomed over him, their violet eyes glowing with a terrifying romantic intensity. He realized with a jolt of pure adrenaline that they weren't letting go. Not now, not ever. The silence in the Singularity Lounge wasn't just quiet. It was heavy, like the pressure of a deep-sea trench. Every alien eye, hundreds of them, was fixed on the human mechanic and the two shimmering pillars of royalty flanking him. Elias felt the sweat prickle at the back of his neck. He tried to offer a casual, disarming grin, the kind that usually worked when he was overcharged for spare parts. "Look, your highnesses or excellencies," Elias stammered, the alcohol in his system suddenly feeling like a very bad idea. "It's a human expression. Being single just means I don't have a co-pilot at the moment. It's not an invitation for a boarding party." The twin on his left, whom he'd mentally dubbed the Sapphire Crest, didn't flinch. Her silver skin pulsed with a deep, rhythmic violet light. "A co-pilot?" she echoed, her voice vibrating through the metal bar stool Elias was clinging to. "You speak of the soul tether. You speak as if your heart is an empty vessel, drifting in the vacuum." The other twin, her eyes swirling like a dying star, leaned so close that Elias could feel the static electricity jumping from her pearlescent skin to his flight jacket. "On Xylar, a male of your technical prowess, a shaper of circuits, who remains unclaimed, is considered a relic of the gods. To leave you drifting is a sin against the Great Weaver." Elias looked around for help. The bartender, a four-armed crustacean who usually had a sarcastic remark ready, was busy polishing a glass with all four hands, studiously ignoring the scene. Nobody wanted to interfere with Xylari business. On Aegis 7, the Xylari didn't just have money. They had the kind of political gravity that could pull a planet out of orbit. "I'm just a guy who fixes atmospheric scrubbers." Elias tried again, his voice dropping to a low, urgent whisper. "I'm not a relic. I'm barely a functional adult most mornings." "This has to be a misunderstanding." "There is no misunderstanding in the sacred vow," the Sapphire Crest declared. She reached out, her fingers tracing the line of Elias's jaw. Her touch wasn't cold. It felt like a low-voltage current, sending a jolt of pure, unadulterated sensation straight to his spine. "You declared your status in the presence of the Twin Crowns. Under Section 4 of the Galactic Concordance, which your species signed in the Sol System Treaty, we have the right of first reclamation." Elias's stomach did a slow, agonizing roll. He remembered the orientation briefings now. Humans had been so eager to join the galactic community that they'd signed thousands of cultural respect clauses without reading the fine print. One of those clauses apparently involved being reclaimed by silver-skinned alien princesses if you complained about your love life in a bar. "Reclamation?" Elias asked, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. "What does that mean, exactly? Like a library book?" The twins shared a look of predatory hunger that made Elias's knees go weak. It wasn't just about politics. There was a raw biological intensity in their gaze that felt like it could melt the hull of a starship. "It means," the second twin whispered, her breath smelling of rare spices and stardust, "that you are coming with us, to our private spire, to be studied, to be cherished, to be integrated." She didn't wait for an answer. With a strength that belied her slender, elegant frame, she gripped Elias's arm and hoisted him off the stool as if he weighed nothing at all. The Sapphire Crest took his other side. Together, they began to march him toward the exit of the lounge. Elias tried to dig his heels in, but the floor of the station was polished composite, and the twins moved with the synchronized grace of a hunting pack. "Whoa, whoa. I have a shift in 6 hours. My supervisor, Miller, he's a jerk. He'll dock my pay." "Your currency is irrelevant now, Elias of Earth," the Sapphire Crest said, her voice filled with an terrifyingly sweet possessiveness. "From this moment on, your only duty is to the Twin Crowns, and our first duty is to ensure you never feel the cold of being single ever again." As they stepped out of the lounge and into the high-security corridor, the heavy blast doors hissed shut behind them, cutting off the noise of the bar. Elias looked at the long, empty hallway ahead. He looked at the two beautiful, unstoppable women holding him tight, He realized then that he wasn't being arrested. He was being harvested. And the worst part? The way they were looking at him. A small, traitorous part of his brain was starting to wonder if being harvested was actually such a bad thing. But then he saw the specialized transport craft waiting at the end of the dock, a sleek, obsidian needle designed for deep space travel. "Wait," Elias gasped as they neared the airlock. "Where are we going? This isn't the way to the residential quarters." The twins smiled in unison, a flash of predatory silver teeth. "Residential quarters are for guests," they said. "We are taking you to the Sovereign's Reach. We're leaving the station. Elias, we're going home." The air inside the obsidian transport ship didn't smell like the recycled, metallic breath of the station. It smelled like a forest after a rainstorm, lush, damp, and heavy with the scent of flowers that had never seen a human sun. Elias stumbled as the twins guided him into a central chamber that looked less like a cockpit and more like a royal velvet lounge. The walls were lined with liquid displays that flowed like molten gold, showing the stars outside blurring into long white streaks as the ship's engines hummed to life. "We're moving," Elias whispered, his back hitting a wall of soft, shimmering fabric. "We're actually leaving the sector. You can't just abduct a Federation citizen because of a joke at a bar." The twin with the sapphire crest, whom he now heard her sister call Lyra, stepped into his personal space. She didn't look angry. She looked enchanted. "Abduction is such a harsh, primitive word, Elias. We prefer sovereign selection. On our world, the words of a shaper are sacred. When you said you were alone, the universe responded. It offered you to us." The second twin, Vanya, began to unbuckle the heavy, grime-streaked tech vest Elias had worn for 3 years. Her fingers were nimble, moving with a terrifying efficiency. "You are covered in the soot of machines, little shaper," she murmured, her violet eyes scanning his face. "Underneath the grease, there's a heart that beats with the rhythm of a pulsar. We can feel it." Elias tried to pull away, but he was trapped between them, two shimmering goddesses of the void who seemed to find his every protest charming. "Listen, I'm just a guy. I like cheap noodles, bad holidays, and sleeping in on Sundays. I'm not some cosmic prize. I'm boring." "Boring?" Lyra laughed, a sound like silver bells ringing in a vacuum. "You humans are the only species in the known sectors that can look at a dying star and think about how to turn it into a battery. You possess a spark of fuck yeah energy that our people have lacked for a millennium. To us, you are the most exciting thing in the galaxy." Vanya leaned in, her lips inches from his ear. "And as for your noodles and sleep, you will have everything you desire. But you will have it within the walls of the Silver Spire, with us. To guide us, to fix our broken worlds, and to be the center of our orbit." Elias felt a cold shiver of realization. This wasn't just a romantic whim. The Xylari were a dying aristocracy of high-tech beings who had lost the ability to innovate. They didn't just want a husband, they wanted a spark. They wanted the human spirit to jumpstart their civilization, and they had chosen him as the battery. Suddenly, the ship jolted. An alarm chimed, a melodic, haunting sound. "Highness," a voice crackled over the comms. "A Federation patrol craft is hailing us. They are demanding to know why a Royal Xylari vessel is departing. Aegis 7 without a flight plan." Elias's heart leaped. Miller. The old jerk must have actually reported him missing when he didn't show up for the equipment check. "That's my people. They're coming for me." Lyra's expression shifted. The warmth in her eyes hardened into a sapphire-cold resolve. She turned to the liquid display and waved her hand. "Tell the Federation craft that the human Elias has entered into a Tier 1 consort contract. By the laws of the Twin Crowns, any interference will be viewed as an act of interstellar war." Elias gasped. "War? Over me? Tell them I'm kidding. Tell them I'm not single." Vanya turned back to him, a predatory smile playing on her lips as she pushed him back into the plush seating. "It is too late for denials, Elias. The claim is recorded. The stars have heard you." Through the viewport, Elias saw the tiny speck of the Federation patrol ship. It looked so small against the vastness of the Xylari ship's shadow. Then, with a sudden gut-wrenching lurch, the obsidian needle accelerated. The patrol ship vanished into a pinprick of light. They were heading into deep space, toward a world he had only seen in textbooks. He was alone with two alien princesses who looked at him like he was the last drop of water in a desert. And as Lyra reached out to take his hand, her skin glowing a soft, inviting pink, Elias realized the joke was officially the most expensive thing he'd ever said. The transition into hyperspace felt like being pulled through a straw made of velvet and starlight. Elias pressed his hands against the cooling vents of the cabin, trying to ground himself as the reality of his abduction settled in. The ship, a masterpiece of Xylari bioengineering, hummed with a frequency that seemed to vibrate in sync with his own pulse. It was unsettling. It was intimate. Lyra stood at the navigation console, her fingers dancing over holographic strings of light. "The Federation patrol has dropped off our sensors," she announced, her voice tinged with a predatory satisfaction. "They are wise to value their peace over one technician, even one as intriguing as you." Vanya, meanwhile, had not moved from Elias's side. She was examining his hands, tracing the scars and calluses earned from years of wrestling with stubborn plasma conduits. "These marks," she whispered, her violet eyes glowing with a soft bioluminescent heat. "They are the map of a soul that refuses to surrender to entropy. On Xylar, we have machines that build machines, but we have forgotten the touch of the Creator. Your humanity is a flame, Elias, and we are very cold." Elias pulled his hand back, his heart hammering a frantic rhythm. "You're talking like I'm a messiah or a museum exhibit. I'm a mechanic. I fix things that leak and things that spark. If you wanted a consultant, you could have sent an email. You didn't have to hijack my entire life because I made a joke at a bar." Vanya's expression didn't harden. It softened into something far more dangerous, pity mixed with desire. "A joke is a truth told in the shadow of fear, Elias. You said you were single because you felt the void of this station. You felt the lack of a bond. We didn't hijack your life. We answered your signal. I wasn't signaling." Elias practically yelled, pacing the small, opulent cabin. "I was venting. Humans do that. We say things we don't mean when we're tired, and the whiskey tastes like jet fuel." Lyra turned away from the console, walking toward him with a grace that made the cabin feel suddenly much smaller. "Perhaps, but the Xylari code of reclamation is absolute. Once the twin crowns witness a declaration of availability from a shaper of your caliber, the bonding process begins automatically. It is a biological imperative, Elias. Look at your arm." Elias froze. He pushed back the sleeve of his flight jacket. Near his wrist, a faint, glowing geometric pattern was beginning to itch beneath the skin. It looked like a double helix interwoven with a silver circuit board. "What is this? What did you do to me?" "The nano tether," Lyra explained, her voice dropping to a cinematic whisper. "It was in the air you breathed the moment we claimed you in the lounge. It is harmless, but it ensures our biologies remain compatible. It is currently mapping your neural pathways to ours. By the time we reach the Silver Spire, you won't just be our consort. You will be our anchor." Elias felt a surge of pure HFY defiance. He wasn't some piece of hardware to be programmed. Compatible? "You're talking about rewriting my brain. I don't care how many princesses you are or how many stars you own. You can't own a human mind. We're too messy for your algorithms." Vanya smiled, and for the first time, Elias saw a flash of genuine challenge in her eyes. "That messines is exactly why we chose you. Our world is perfect, Elias, and perfection is a tomb. We need your chaos. We need your single heart to beat for us until it forgets how to be alone." She reached out, her hand hovering just an inch from the glowing mark on his wrist. The air between them crackled with static tension. Elias knew he should run, but where? They were light years from the nearest human colony, trapped in a bubble of silver and violet. Suddenly, the ship groaned. A massive resonant thud shook the deck, throwing Elias forward straight into Lyra's arms. The lights flickered to a deep, ominous red. Status. Lyra barked at the ship's AI. Hull breach detected in the cargo bay, a melodic voice replied. We are being intercepted by a scavenger leech ship. Identifying signature, the Void Reapers. Lyra's face went pale. The Reapers? Here. They must have tracked the royal signature from the station. She looked at Elias, her grip on his waist tightening. They don't want the ship. They want the cargo. They want you, Elias. A human shaper on the black market is worth more than a star system. Elias looked at the red-lit corridor. The perfect Xylari technology was failing under the brutal, jagged assault of the Scavengers. He looked at the two princesses who, for all their grace, looked momentarily paralyzed by the sudden chaos. A grim smile touched Elias's lips. Well, he muttered, reaching for a heavy wrench he'd tucked into his belt earlier. If they want a human, they're about to find out why you should never try to reclaim one of us when we're having a bad day. The screech of metal on metal was like a dying god's scream. A jagged, rusted boarding spike from the scavenger leech ship had pierced the obsidian hull, and the atmosphere in the cabin began to whistle with a terrifying, thin hiss. The perfect Xylari technology was staggering under the primitive, brutal assault of the Void Reapers. Lyra and Vanya, usually so composed, looked at the breach with a flicker of genuine shock. Their civilization hadn't seen a real fight in centuries. They were poets in a galaxy that still had wolves. The internal dampeners are failing, Lyra shouted over the roar of escaping air. Elias, stay behind us. Our kinetic shields will protect you. Forget the shields. Elias roared, his human survival instincts kicking into overdrive. He grabbed a magnetic sealant canister from a nearby emergency locker, a piece of tech he knew better than his own name. Your shields are designed for particle beams, not jagged iron. Vanya, get to the secondary console and reroute the life support to this sector. Lyra, give me your hand. Lyra hesitated, her violet eyes wide. My hand? Elias, the breach. Do it, Elias barked. It wasn't a request. It was a command from a man who spent his life preventing atmospheric collapse. He grabbed her shimmering silver hand, using the bioluminescent glow of her skin to light the dark corner where the hull was buckling. With a rhythmic, practiced motion, he jammed the sealant into the fissure and triggered the chemical foam. The whistling stopped. The pressure stabilized. But the danger wasn't over. A heavy thump echoed from the other side of the airlock. The Void Reaper's biological horrors, stitched together from a dozen scavenger species, were burning through the door. They are coming, Vanya whispered, her skin pulsing a frantic, panicked red. We are not armed for a boarding action. We are a diplomatic vessel. Elias looked at the two princesses. They were powerful, yes, but they were soft. They were used to being obeyed, not hunted. He gripped his heavy pulse wrench, the weight of the tool familiar and comforting. On Earth, Elias said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl. We have a saying. If you want to survive the void, you don't just fix the machines. You become the machine. He kicked a panel off the wall, exposing a nest of glowing fiber optic cables. Lyra, you said I have a spark, right? That I can turn a dying star into a battery? Well, watch this. With a series of rapid, violent movements, Elias began stripping the wires. He wasn't just repairing, he was weaponizing. He bypassed the safety limiters of the ship's internal security grid, channeling the massive energy of the warp drive directly into the floor plating of the corridor. What are you doing? Vanya gasped, watching him work with a speed that defied Xylari logic. You'll burn out the secondary processors. Better a burnt processor than a scavenger's trophy case, Elias grunted. He stepped back just as the airlock door turned cherry red and finally buckled inward. A massive, multi-limbed creature, covered in scavenged armor and wielding a vibrating vibroaxe, stepped into the mist. It let out a guttural roar, its many eyes fixing on the precious human shaper and the two princesses. But before it could take a second step, Elias slammed two cables together. A blinding arc of blue electricity surged through the floor. The Scavenger didn't even have time to scream. The sheer amperage of the Xylari engines cooked its nervous system instantly, sending it flying back into the airlock in a cloud of ozone and charred meat. Elias didn't wait. He grabbed a heavy metal pipe, his face set in a mask of grim determination. "Lyra, Vanya, seal that airlock from the bridge now. I'm going to make sure their boarding spike doesn't take the rest of the ship with it when we jump." The twins stared at him, their violet eyes swirling with a new kind of intensity. It wasn't just lust anymore. It was awe. They were seeing the HFY spirit in its purest, most violent form, the human who refuses to die, the mechanic who turns a luxury ship into a death trap for his enemies. "Go," Elias yelled. As they scrambled toward the bridge, Lyra looked back, her silver skin shimmering with a newfound devotion. "He is not just a shaper," she whispered to her sister. "He is a storm." Elias stood alone in the red-lit corridor, wrench in hand, facing the darkness of the breach. He was a long way from the bar on Aegis 7. He was a long way from being single. And as the next wave of scavengers began to howl from the shadows, Elias realized he wasn't just fighting for his life. He was fighting for the two women who had claimed him, and he was starting to realize he might just like the responsibility. The corridor smelled of ozone and the metallic tang of scorched scavenger armor. Elias stood his ground, the heavy pulse wrench in his hand humming with a low, threatening vibration. Two more Void Reapers, hunched, multi-limbed nightmares with skin like wet leather, scrambled through the buckled airlock. They didn't use guns. They used jagged, rusted blades designed to paralyze their prey. They wanted him alive, but they didn't care if he was intact. "Come on, then," Elias roared, his voice echoing through the ship's sleek, silver halls. "I've dealt with broken fusion cores more temperamental than you lot." The first scavenger lunged. Elias didn't retreat. He stepped into the strike, parrying a rusted blade with the shaft of his wrench. The impact sent a jar of white-hot pain up his arm, but he didn't flinch. He used the momentum to drive his elbow into the creature's central ocular cluster. A sickening crunch followed, and the beast recoiled, howling in a frequency that shattered the nearby light fixtures. Behind him, the bridge doors hissed open. Lyra and Vanya didn't stay hidden. They emerged, but they were transformed. They had shed their royal robes, revealing skin-tight combat weave suits that shimmered with tactical data. In their hands were elegant, slender crystal rods, Xylari pulse staves. "Elias, get down," Lyra commanded. Elias dropped to his knees as a beam of concentrated violet light hissed over his head, vaporizing the second scavenger mid-leap. Vanya moved with a fluid, terrifying grace, her staff spinning in a blur of light that deflected a volley of poisoned darts from the shadows of the breach. "We are the daughters of the Hegemon," Vanya cried out, her voice amplified by the ship's internal speakers until it sounded like a goddess's wrath. "You dare lay hands on our shaper? You dare stain the Silver Spire with your filth?" Together, the three of them pushed back. It was a dance of human brutality and alien elegance. Elias provided the raw, unpredictable power using the environment, ripping panels off the walls to create shields, and short-circuiting floor tiles to trap the intruders. The twins provided the precision, their pulse staves cutting through the scavenger ranks with surgical lethality. For a moment, in the heat of the battle, their eyes met. Elias saw it then, the bond Lyra had mentioned. It wasn't just a tracking device or a social contract. It was a shared frequency. He could feel their heartbeat in the solace of his feet. They could feel his adrenaline like a shot of pure oxygen. They were working as one. The leech ship is detaching. Lyra shouted, her violet eyes flashing. "They've realized the cargo has teeth." "Not so fast," Elias grunted, heading for a manual override lever near the breach. "They poked a hole in my ride. I'm not letting them walk away with a sorry about that." With a surge of HFY spite, Elias jammed his wrench into the override gears, locking the scavenger's boarding spike in place. "Vanya, invert the gravimetric stabilizers. Give them a taste of their own pulling power." Vanya grinned, a sharp, dangerous expression that looked beautiful on her silver face. She slammed her hand onto the console. The ship groaned as its massive engines fought against the scavenger vessel. Instead of the leech ship pulling away, it was dragged closer, its rusted hull beginning to crumple under the Xylari ship's superior structural integrity. With a final violent lurch, the boarding spike snapped, shearing off a massive chunk of the Scavenger's primary reactor housing. The enemy ship spiraled away into the void, venting atmosphere and fuel in a trail of frozen fire. Silence returned to the corridor, broken only by the heavy breathing of the three survivors. Elias slumped against the wall, his flight jacket torn, his knuckles bleeding, but his eyes bright with the fire of victory. Lyra approached him slowly. She didn't check the ship's status. She didn't look at the carnage. She reached out and gently wiped a smudge of scavenger blood from his cheek. Her touch was no longer just a claim, it was a sanctuary. "You fought for us," she whispered, her voice trembling with an emotion Elias couldn't quite name. "Not because you had to. Not because of the nano tether. You fought because you chose to." "I told you," Elias said, a weary smile tugging at his lips. "Humans don't like being told what to do. But we're pretty good at protecting what's ours." Vanya stepped up on his other side, leaning her head against his shoulder. "Is that what we are, Elias? Are we yours?" Elias looked at the two princesses, the most powerful, beautiful, and slightly terrifying women in the sector. He thought about the bar on Aegis 7, and he thought about the journey ahead to the Silver Spire. "I think," Elias muttered, "that joke is getting more serious by the second." But as the ship stabilized, and the stars began to blur into the long lines of hyperspace once more, a new signal began to chime on the bridge. It wasn't a scavenger. It was a high-priority encrypted transmission from the Xylari home world. Lyra's face went pale as she read the scrolling text. "It's our father," she whispered, "the High Hegemon. He knows we've claimed a human. And he's sending the royal fleet to intercept us." The bridge of the Sovereign's Reach was bathed in a cold, pulsing indigo light. On the main view screen, the fabric of space seemed to tear open as 6 massive Xylari war spires dropped out of warp, surrounding their small vessel in a perfect, inescapable sphere of geometric precision. These weren't luxury yachts. They were kilometers of shimmering silver hull packed with enough antimatter ordnance to crack a moon. "He found us," Lyra whispered, her fingers trembling as they hovered over the Cums array. "The High Hegemon doesn't believe in accidents or jokes. To him, a human shaper is a strategic asset. If he takes you, Elias, you won't be our consort. You'll be a prisoner in a gilded cage, forced to reverse engineer human spite for the royal army." Elias looked at the massive fleet. His heart hammered, but it wasn't fear. It was that stubborn HFY spark of irritation. "So let me get this straight," he said, wiping grease and scavenger blue blood onto his pants. "Your dad wants to turn me into a lab rat because I'm good with a wrench. He's clearly never met a human mechanic who's missed his lunch break." Vanya stepped forward, her violet eyes burning with a rebellious fire. "He will take you from us, Elias. He will reset the nano tether. He will erase the night in the Singularity Lounge. To the hegemony, we are just vessels for the bloodline. But to us, you are the first thing that has felt real in a century." "Then we don't let him," Elias said, his voice dropping to a low, cinematic growl. He stepped toward the main engineering terminal. "Lyra, Vanya, on your world, everything is built on perfection, right? Everything is synced, logical, and predictable. That's why your dad's fleet is so scary. But do you know what the Xylari don't have a setting for?" The twins looked at him, mesmerized. "What?" they asked in unison. "Improvisation," Elias grinned. "I'm going to overclock the ship's gravimetric drive, using the Scavenger's stuck boarding spike as a lightning rod. It's going to create a localized distortion field that'll make us look like a collapsing star on their sensors for exactly 90 seconds. It's dangerous, it's stupid, and it'll probably melt the floorboards. It's human," Lyra breathed, a smile breaking across her pearlescent face. "Do it," Elias's hands flew across the interface, bypassing ancient safety protocols that hadn't been touched in 1,000 years. He rerouted the power, feeling the ship groan under the strain. "Hold on to something," he yelled. The Sovereign's reach didn't just move, it blurred. The ship leaped forward in a jagged, flickering strobe of light, slipping through the gap in the Royal Fleet's formation before their automated targeting computers could even register a lock. The High Hegemon's flagship fired a warning shot, but it passed through the space Elias had occupied a millisecond prior. "We're through." Vanya cheered, throwing her arms around Elias as the stars stretched into the beautiful, chaotic tunnel of a blind jump. They were gone. Not toward the Silver Spire, and not back to Aegis 7. They were heading into the dead sectors, the lawless, beautiful frontier where a human and 2 alien princesses could disappear forever. As the ship settled into its long trek, Elias slumped into the captain's chair. Lyra sat on the armrest to his left, her hand entwined with his. Vanya knelt at his right, resting her chin on his knee. The silence was no longer heavy. It was a promise. "You know," Elias muttered, looking at the glowing mark on his wrist that had finally stopped itching and started to feel like home. "I really only said I was single as a joke." Lyra leaned in, her lips brushing his ear as her skin glowed a soft, triumphant pink. "The universe doesn't take jokes, Elias. It takes opportunities. And we are never letting ours go." Elias looked out at the infinite stars, a mechanic who had accidentally become a king of the void. He had a broken ship to fix, a galactic empire chasing him, and 2 twin princesses who looked at him like he was the center of the galaxy. "Fair enough," Elias smiled, closing his eyes. "I guess I'm off the market. I hope you enjoyed this journey into the stars. If you want to see more tales of human grit and alien romance, make sure to like this video and share it with your fellow sci-fi fans. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel HFY Soundscape and hit that notification bell so you never miss a single story. What should Elias and the twins do next? Should they build a hidden empire or take the fight to the High Hegemon? Let me know your theories in the comments below.